So our first speaker, if you want to come on up, is Pradeep Nayar. He is the VP of Global Design at Hyatt Hotels Corporation, overseeing design work for digital products, focusing on creating distinct guest experiences. Previously, he has had several design leadership roles across Fortune 500 companies, finance, e-commerce, media, and now the hospitality industry. He is going to talk about evolving an in-house design practice, 10 lessons from the trenches. Are you ready?
I am. All right.
Do you want a clicker?
I don't know if I need a clicker. I got it.
Okay.
I don't even need a mic, I think. You guys can hear me? Excellent. All right, awesome.
Okay.
Do I need it?
Yeah, use the mic.
Okay.
The video will be happy.
All right. So, for some of you who are wondering what's going on, I just wanted to say that, earlier this year I saw someone present with videos, and I was like, I got to put videos somewhere in my slides. So this is my attempt to put videos. It's more than just the title slide. I'm just warning you right now. But this is just me trying to geek out on videos. I don't think people know, but maybe like a few minutes before we started, kind of hell broke loose in the sense the projector wasn't working. And so the crew was actually figuring out what's going on. It reminded me a lot of my first time when I taught at DePaul. I was teaching. I was the first time teaching at DePaul as an adjunct. And it was April 1st, believe it or not. And 10 minutes before class started, the projector broke. So I was getting like weird flashbacks of this happening again. Thankfully, it all works. So a little bit about me. When people ask, I usually tell people, I'm somebody who's just passionate about how design and technology makes people's lives better. That's the easiest way for me to describe what I do. And then they go to, all right, how do you fix my phone? So that's kind of how I kind of self-describe myself. I've been working in this space for a while. Sad to say it's been 2 decades. Feel really old, like a dinosaur, when I say that. Back in the day, it was called usability. I was an information architect. Fun times. So I've actually worked in a few industries in my time being a design leader. I started off in media at Tribune, where I made the pivot from being a developer into design. It's kind of an unusual shift when that happened. I still remember a conversation with some folks who said, are you crazy? What's going on? Why are you doing this? People are going from the other way, from design to technology. But I just realized that that's what I'm passionate about, and that's kind of how I pivoted. I was fortunate enough to be in a company that was going through a lot of transformation. And I got the opportunity to be an information architect. And after a while, after 2 managers left, they gave me the opportunity, because of my passion for it, to actually lead the team. So I took it from me and a few other folks, like another information architect who used to be a PHP developer. When the dot-com boom kind of happened, or the crash happened, he kind of went incognito as a PHP developer. And so he came out of the woodwork, and we had a few visual designers, and that started the first UX team at Tribune. And then from there, we grew the practice and all that, and a lot of fun times at Tribune. There's a lot of crazy war stories of working at a media company that was reinventing itself from being a newspaper company to a media company. A lot of crazy stories there. And then from there, I went to Grainger, where I was part of a growing e-commerce UX team, which went, my team, the one that I was focused on, went from 1 to 10 people, but the overall team went from 15 to 60 people. And then at Allstate, when I moved there, my team was around 13 people. The UX team was around 19 people. 4.5 years later, we were 200 people across the globe, and my team was around 80 people. So talking about scale and the kind of the craziness that goes with that, I've had a lot of that experience, either by choice or just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. Some of the brands that I've had the pleasure of working with and playing with, and really kind of growing up, working on some of these different brands. And today, actually, before I do that, Preet said, hey, it would be fun if you actually shared some pictures of you back in the day. So that's me there, much skinnier and younger. And then here's a picture from Grainger, a little chubbier, and I couldn't find a better picture. And then here's me at Allstate. Weight really is becoming an issue right now. So now I'm at Hyatt. And to be honest, I've been at Hyatt for the last 8 weeks. I'm counting weeks. It's not been months or years. So I am brand new to Hyatt, and it's actually a fascinating journey working in hospitality, very different from insurance. I joke that insurance and hospitality are similar. It's all kind of in the service design industry, right, where you're serving people. The difference is, in insurance, you wish people never use the product. In hospitality, you wish people absolutely love the product, right, the experience they have. And so it's been a fascinating journey. Usability tests are a lot more fun. It's not about people complaining about the claims process. It's about people getting excited talking about their last vacation. So people, when you hear Hyatt, people think of just a few names like Hyatt Regency. What people don't know, sometimes all of you may or may not know this, there's 18 brands. So I didn't stay at the preferred venue. Unfortunately, I couldn't because it was a Marriott, right? I think it was. So I had to stay at a Hyatt, and I was actually at the Thompson, which is not too far from the venue. It gives me an opportunity to kind of experience these brands offline to see how I could do things differently online. So that's kind of where I am right now, 8 weeks, so don't question me too much. I might have some idea where I want to go, but I'm still figuring out how to get around the building beyond just knowing where the restrooms are. So today I'm going to talk about 10 lessons. And when Preet first reached out and said, hey, would you be able to talk? I was like, sure. And then I said, I'm just in the middle of changing jobs. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about because I haven't done stuff yet in this new job. And he's like, do what's natural. I'm like, I'm usually in a situation where I'm giving people advice on things. And so I was like, let me just use this as a retrospective of my career as a leader in-house. And so I'm going to use more videos. And I'm going to start with my first lesson. So first is really around aligning expectations of the organizational maturity. I was at a conference. This is a while back. And yes, it is a nerdy kind of conference story. And the reason I call it a nerdy conference story was it was a few of us that went and started speaking to the speaker after they did their talk because we were geeking out about what the speaker was talking about. And so we were like asking all sorts of questions. And a lot of people were kind of complaining about how slow things are in an enterprise. And like they're frustrated about how things are. And somebody who was in the audience who was there kind of talking about this was like, you know what? Organizations, they're just kind of like, they're like humans. And people are like, what are you talking about? And so he said, well, like how there are different organs in a human body, and like each function in the organization is kind of like that. It's doing a function, but eventually like it comes together as a system. I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? He said, like, what do you really need to align on is your metabolic rate of how you process things aligned with how the organization processes ideas, taking it all the way to developing something and releasing it. Now, I don't know about all of you. I'm a dad with 2 kids. So if there are some dad jokes that don't make any sense, this is going to be one of them. But the whole idea here is, how do you make sure that the way you think and the speed at which you operate is the way in which the organization operates? And if it's not aligned, you're always going to have problems with the organization you're in. You're always going to be like, why is it so slow? Or why are things moving so fast? It's because you're not aligned right now with the organization you're working in. Organizations are not static either. They're kind of like human beings taking it to the next level. They kind of evolve, right? And there's so many models talking about organizational maturity, taking it a level higher. There's like a corporate maturity model. This came out of, this is somebody who actually, I remember stumbling upon this when I was doing a thesis for my master's a long time ago. And I thought it was fascinating because it talked about the life cycle of a general corporate entity, what it goes through. And it's kind of very interesting to look at things that way because it puts things in perspective. The other things are like, Envision's got like 5 stages of maturity in an organization. Jared talked about his 5 stages. These are all different ways to kind of make sense or rationalize where things are today based on where you are compared to where things are around you. To then say, do we really have executive support? Because at the end of the day, no matter what model you have, if you don't have somebody higher up that's actually supporting you, you're not going to get as far as you think you can, right? No matter how optimistic you can be. So that's something to keep in mind. At the end of the day, it's really about you as an individual, the team that you're operating and running, and the organization. Like, is there a level of alignment of expectations? Are you having the right level of expectation from your team? Does your team have the right level of expectation from the organization? Is the organization seeing the value the team's delivering? All of this needs to be aligned. Easier said than done, right? Next lesson. Actively increase your sphere of influence. Now, when we talk about influence, I don't know if you can ever talk about influence without talking about Game of Thrones. It is all about, and not that organizations are Game of Thrones, so don't quote me on that. It's not like that, but what's really important is to understand what is your org chart. I worked in organizations for such a long time, and I will tell you that maybe the last 8 years is when I really realized how important it is to understand who all are doing what in your organization. If you have no idea who so-and-so who's sitting a few cubes away is doing, I think it's time to understand that, because at the end of the day, they're all part of the larger ecosystem. Instead of just thinking about org charts, you also have to think about how are people related to one another, who's influencing who. This is a little dated, so all of you who are Game of Thrones fans, this is not accurate. If you watch season 10, was that 10 the last one? Or was it 9? 8? Okay, I'm making up new seasons now. But the whole idea is you should understand not just org structure, but also how are people influencing one another. And I don't know how many people here actually create stakeholder maps. Do you create stakeholder maps? Show of hands, stakeholder maps? Do you do it for the initiative you're working on, or who all are going to influence what you're working on as an individual or as a team? I think a lot of times we do it to think about who all are going to impact what we're doing as an initiative. We don't sometimes think and pause and really reflect on what do we need to do for us to be successful. Like, who are the stakeholders that really are going to impact us, indirectly or directly, and sometimes even for the team. And obviously there's different ways to make some sort of association between certain stakeholders. But beyond thinking about the org chart, thinking about stakeholder maps is super important. Your goal is to influence them, right? I joke about Jedi mind tricks, and I didn't use that on the slide, but honestly, Jedi mind tricks are what you need to learn. Because people are not going to do things just because that's the right thing to do. They have to understand what you're trying to do, and you should be able to influence them. And influence is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, right? If you're kind of influencing people for good reasons. You notice it's not, it is Yoda, so it's not like I'm saying you need to go, and be part of the dark side. So influencing for the right reason. Lesson 3, know the currency of the organization. What does that mean? Have any of you thought really hard about what does success look like in the organization? Every organization is different. I've worked in organizations where success is releasing something on time and on budget. Sounds familiar? I've worked in organizations where it's all about who has a new shiny object that everybody else is behind. Sometimes it's also about who actually has a stronger personal relationship with the person on the top. So really understand what is the currency that actually is going to get you to be successful. Another random question, like the last time you heard somebody's promotion announcement, think about what really got them promoted. Actually, don't make stories of your own. Find out what really got them promoted. That's even better. I wouldn't recommend making stories because those don't help. Those don't have any facts behind it. But think about what gets people promoted. Understand it. Ask people, because that's what success is defined in that organization. And if it doesn't align with who you are as a person, maybe the organization isn't right for where you want to go. Town halls, all-hand meetings. What is it that everybody gets excited about? Those are the things that are like, I wonder why they're talking about that. Maybe we should position what we're doing in this way. I mean, those are the things that need to be going through everyone's mind to be successful in an organization. Now, a few of you might be working in an organization as a central service that's kind of working with different parts of to the organization. This is the biggest challenge, is where you have different groups that have competing goals that don't talk to each other and don't care about each other, right? And a lot of this is really around how do we make sure the goals are aligned. Not always does it happen, but sometimes you got to figure out other ways in which you can get people to align on goals. All right, lesson 4. I'm speeding through. I like this video, so I'm going to let it play a little bit. It's really about making sure we're speaking the same language. It's really about making sure that we're not just using fancy words so that we can look intelligent and be in a meeting where we use fancy words so people are like, oh, I guess they're very intelligent, but you're using words I don't understand. Guess what? If you do that, and if other people use other words, it's just going to sound like a bunch of noise. You're not speaking with the same language. You're not speaking with a language that everybody understands. And I personally have been in this situation a number of times. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation where a researcher is talking about a research plan and the product person does not care. They just need it to be done, right? And they just need to get to an outcome. But there are times where you actually have product people that are interested in the research mechanism because they are genuinely interested about it. Figure out what that is and make sure you're having a shared conversation. Because this is how it feels sometimes. I totally get it, right? It is about the common language. I'll tell you specifically, when I was working at an insurance company, which I'm sure you know which one that is, Allstate, I was having a tough time getting my peers to experiment. The reason that I was having a tough time is because the word experiment means it takes a long time. It means we're going to delay building something. And so, I was kind of scratching my head saying, what can I do differently to talk to these people so they understand what I'm trying to say? Now, if you think about insurance, the whole business of insurance is based on the idea that you are actually mitigating risk, you are hedging your bets. So then, what I did was just tweak the words and say, we're all about de-risking our product before it releases. So let's figure out how we can de-risk it. And then all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, yeah, let's talk more about that. That's interesting. What are you trying to do here? Like, de-risk it. How do you do that? Again, simple, just a word. The word was different. All of a sudden, now they understand things in a perspective that we have been using all these fancy words of hypothesis and experimentation. And all they said was like, well, you just need to de-risk it. And they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Because at the end of the day, UX, design, whatever you want to call yourself, we talk about empathy, but I will tell you from my experience, we're the worst at being empathetic with our peers. And sometimes we forget that they're also humans. This is my opinion, because I've seen it a few times, where if only they understood the way we were thinking about things. Well, we just have to think about how is it that you can talk about it in words and in ways in which it matters to the person you're talking to. So just kind of step into their shoes for a little bit to understand some of the challenges they're facing. All right, so we went from like kind of calibrating yourself to now thinking about the team. When you think about a team and you're starting small, one of the biggest challenges is you are tempted to do everything. I can tell you this is the biggest, from a leader standpoint, this is the biggest challenge I see people have, is you're always tempted to do everything. Oh, we need to get involved here. Oh, we need to get involved there. And you might burn out, or you might try to do too much and really not achieve anything. I think it's so important to pace yourself. I've seen this happen time and time again. Do you even have like a rationale where the whole team comes together? Like understanding the why behind why we exist? Anybody knows the difference between a mission and a vision? Come on, tough crowd. Yes?
Vision is where you're going, the mission is how you get there.
Ooh, okay, I like that. So I say it slightly differently. That's fair, too. I say mission is what we live by today. Vision is where we're going. It's pretty much the same thing. But it's more like it gives calibration to the team saying, our mission today is to do this, our mission for the next few months is to do this. And then if anybody asks you, why are we doing this? Is because that's our tactical effort to get towards that final vision. But it needs to be something that needs to be communicated more often than you think. As leaders, a lot of time, you're thinking about this all the time. You forget that the people that are following you don't always think about it. So you actually have to spend time talking about it. In fact, you will find yourself repeating yourself so much that you're going to ask yourself, am I doing this again and again? People just think that I'm just repeating things again and again. To be honest, you're going to feel that way, but the people who are listening to you are not going to feel that way because they don't think like you are, right? Because they're focused on different things that matter to them. When I look at, all these models talk about kind of an outside perspective of how we look at design within the organization. I am going to take you through what I consider more my inside-out perspective. So it's about me as somebody running a design team, like how do I look at myself as I interact with the peers? And honestly, this is the way I've seen it kind of evolve over the times in which I've worked. Typically, design starts as a service. And I'm going to say that some of us might say, like, hey, we're like an internal agency. It's the worst thing you can ever do is say that. And I'll tell you why. It starts like this, where you go in saying we're an internal agency because you want to do as much as you can. But the reality is an internal agency is just a cheaper agency. If there are parts of the organization that can actually leverage an agency or an external partner, they would go there. The only reason they'll come to you is because you're cheaper. So don't position yourself as an internal agency. But if you're starting and you want to start getting some traction with work, starting as a service is not a bad way. There will be a lot of projects, not products. And then you want to figure out which of these projects are really going to be the ones that differentiate me and the team. And that's where you kind of figure out, how do I evolve into being an advisor? And an advisor is not somebody that's accountable and has skin in the game. An advisor is somebody who has high level of influence on the decision. And so to move from a service to an advisor, you have to think about which of the key strategic initiatives that are going to take you from this stage of maturity to the next stage where people look at you for the expertise you bring to the table. So as an advisor, you will have influence over some folks, but you may not have influence over everybody in the organization, and that's okay. But as an advisor, the people you have an influence on are the ones that are going to pull you up and make sure you actually become a partner. This is not something that happens overnight. This takes a long time. In fact, I've worked in organizations where I've given up after being an advisor because I didn't have the patience to take it to the next level to be a partner. And that's okay, because you need resilience, and sometimes you kind of need to go somewhere else to re-energize yourself. But this is how I look at it, more from an inside-out perspective. At the end of the day, it is about influence, and that's really what's going to help you drive things. All right, lesson 6, halfway through. Let's talk about process, or maybe let's not talk about process. Because when you Google like design process, I think it goes on and on and on. And it goes from circles to ellipses to triangles to more triangles. And I don't have anything against process. I'll tell you what I think is the biggest challenge we have as designers is that we like to hold on to things that we own. And I don't believe a process is something that anybody as a designer should own. It should be what everybody does. This is how we as an organization operate. And so as much as you can, don't have your own process. But if you do start, the one that I've found very useful is a double diamond. Everybody knows the double diamond? Yes, everybody knows the double diamond. OK. But I will say that this is the easiest for me to use, and I'll tell you why it works when I've used it in the past. It's mainly because initiatives start here. This is where they come to you first, like, hey, we've got budget, we've got developers, they're ready to crank away. You should have been involved, yesterday. Now please come and let's get started, and let's just solution right now. And unfortunately, this is how it starts. Now, what's good about the double diamond is, for people who you're trying to influence, it works as a good mechanism to say, great, you started right in the middle of our process. We're more than happy to help you out throughout this execution. But over time, what we want to get to is kind of get people further upstream. And that's actually a conversation that doesn't happen overnight. I would not recommend you saying, oh, you came to us and you're right here. We can engage with you. Let's start here first. You're not going to get a lot of traction that way. You got to give them some before you get some. So that's kind of how it operates, at least from my experience. But the key thing here is to really think about if there's an overall product development lifecycle, how do you make sure design's part of it? So this is a point of time of the overall product development lifecycle, and you can't see it, but what you can't see is a little triangle right here, which is the first diamond, right, of the double diamond. And it's not really about what design has as a process and what product development lifecycle is. It's what is our overall shared process. This is something I know needs a lot more time to explain, but I think that's a talk by itself. So I'm not going to do that today. But the real thing is, if you can avoid it, because you're not a service and you're embedded, don't have your own process that's different from the overall process. Make it integrated. All right, so let's talk about people. Let's talk about a growth mindset. Anybody knows what growth mindset is? Jared talked a little bit about a learning mindset. Yes, please.
Growth mindset is just in general, like, be willing and open to, like, as you fail, like, you can overcome it and keep growing.
As you fail, you can keep learning from it. Excellent. So this is the official definition from Google. But it's like I Googled it. It's individuals who believe their talents can be developed. I think that's very neat because it's really about having a mindset that I don't know everything. I know enough to get me by today, but I'm going to always learn and evolve as a person. And that's something you have to instill as a leader in your teams to actually drive the best out of your people. Everyone talks about the specialist versus the generalist. I don't like the T. I'll tell you why. I think the T is convenient because you're kind of an expert in something, so you feel good about it, and you're broad about it, and you're skinny enough that it's just a sliver you need to know to be dangerous. And I don't personally like it because I don't feel like it does true justice to somebody with a growth mindset. I like to say that the T should evolve more into a V, where you're like continuously pushing and learning more about other things. I kind of think about it more somebody who's just an expert in something but is curious about everything. And I like to think of it as a pie. So that's the way I look at it, and that's the way I've seen like talent in general kind of growing are the ones that are not just T-minded, but are like V-minded, right? That are pie-shaped. And that's something that I've just seen over the years is becoming more and more prevalent. The other thing I'll say, and this is a very tactical thing, it's a pet peeve, so I have it as a slide. If you're working in enterprise and you're kind of working with resources, stop calling people resources. If you're really growth-minded, call them talent. Call them talent because that's who they are, right? And when you look at evolving talent, it's not just about hard skills, it's about soft skills. And what does that mean? Hard skills are like craft-related skills, and then soft skills are things that you gain by screwing up a lot. That's really what it is. And so when you think about hard skills and soft skills, you should think about how do you map them? And this is just an illustration to show how you map them. I know it's kind of washed out, but these tools are things that you could use to work with talent in your organization to say, where do you think you fit in these kind of skills that we think are valuable for you to be successful in our organization? And then help them figure out, do they actually work on their weakness, or do they actually continue to evolve their strengths? And I'm more of the camp of evolving strengths and just making sure you can cover up for your weaknesses than actually trying to get rounded all together, because you can't. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day, not superhuman. When it comes to growing talent, you also have to think about what are the different models. The 70-20-10, have people heard about this? This is a typical organizational development model. And if you're at a conference, you're only getting your 10%, by the way. Because you're just getting maybe a little bit of the 20 because you're actually talking to people. But majority of it is by doing it. And that's the 70%. And I don't think we, as a community, really spend enough time talking about how do you get better by doing. Because at the end of the day, when you're thinking about talent, you're really trying to help people find their purpose. This sounds very cliche, cheesy. I don't know, you could say whatever you want to say. I will tell you some of my proudest moments are when people actually find opportunities that get them closer to where they want to go, and it's not in my organization. I've had folks that were designers that became product managers, who became engineers, who became agile coaches. More than happy to see that happen. I think as leaders, you have to be careful. Don't be greedy and hold on to people because they're good at what they do. Help them grow. And so that's something I would say to anybody who's new to doing this. You have to think about also how the team evolves. As the team grows, everyone's not going to be static. And it's not just you as an individual kind of saving the day. You're just one person. You have to assemble a team of superheroes that can make it happen. I like the analogy of superheroes or teams rather than family. The reason why I don't like family as much is mainly because family means it's okay to live with everybody else's inefficiencies, and the fact that you only meet once in a while for like Thanksgiving. Maybe I'm talking about my family, but hopefully you'll relate to that. What I like about a team of, like being a winning team is that you're always looking for what is the right draft you need to achieve what you need to achieve. You're not always going to have the same team, and it's okay for you to trade out, right? And that's why I like that analogy better, because your needs are going to evolve over time. And if you think that your team's going to be fine, one of the hardest things to do is, if you know where you're going to evolve the org to, is hiring for today with the eye for tomorrow. That's really hard to do, because sometimes you don't even know what tomorrow is going to look like. But those are the things that you get paid the big bucks for. Career ladders. How many here have a career documentation or ladder that kind of talks about career pathing in general? Oh, we've got a few folks. Excellent. I don't like career ladders. The reason I say that, I'm not doing that to stir a debate. I'm going to come to a point. The reason is it's not always vertical. It's lateral, and sometimes it's more like a jungle gym. Because sometimes you need to go laterally to actually really figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And I usually say trellis is what I usually use, but I found a cool image of a jungle gym, and I was like, this is close to reality. This is what it is. Sometimes you had to go all the way down again to go back again up, especially if you're shifting careers. So nothing against ladders, is just think about it differently. Think about lateral movement. The other thing I'd say is, like, depending on where people are in your organization, think about, like, how do you keep it fresh? As an enterprise leader, one of the challenges is going to keep people excited about work, right? And you have to consciously think about rotating people at different parts of the organization. Otherwise, you're going to lose talent. It's not going to be challenging. It's going to get boring and monotonous. And challenge doesn't mean new initiative. It's not that, you worked on responsive, now you can work on mobile. It could also be because you're going to deal with much difficult stakeholders. That could be challenge too. So think about it like that, and talk about it openly, because this is how you want to keep talent in. And obviously, depending on seniority, it's easier to do this. But having some sort of rotation plan is very healthy to do. All right, coming close to the end. Lesson 9. When you scale, you got to think about how leadership scales and how operations scales. I'm not going to talk about design ops or research ops, but I'm going to say that thinking about scaling is really important. This is a graphic that actually shows the lines of communication of people that, and you can see as the number of people increase, the lines of communication are absolutely ridiculous. And it gets harder and harder to actually get things accomplished if you don't have good mechanisms to do that. How many here have people they manage, like, with maybe 14 people? Oh, we have some brave souls here. Feels like that a little bit? Maybe? No? Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. When you think about the team when it's small, it's nice. You can actually, the people, you have lunch with them, you remember people's birthdays. You can maintain quality and not lose sleep saying, oh, I wonder how that product's working. You can actually get to see it and have opportunities to evolve it. You can share practices, and there's a strong sense of community, right? As the team scales, that gets harder. That gets harder because I'll admit, you'll sometimes even not know the names of people who've joined the organization. I've been there. I just don't know some of the people. I've been in situations where I have people who have joined, and the team had grown so big that was across like 8 different locations across the globe, and I didn't know the name of people when I'm like, I know you're part of my team, but I don't remember your name. But that happens, and it's not fun for me or for any leader. And so there's something to think about. Quality, the way you deal with it, you have to have some sort of design system. No brainer there. And then operations is definitely going to be focused on making sure people actually work well together and are focusing on their work as opposed to communicating it. And there are going to be small cliques. You're not going to have the same chemistry the team had when they were like 5 people. And that's okay. Don't try to control it. You can't. You can influence it, but you can't control it. So what worked then will not work when you scale, and that's okay. I think a lot of it is really letting go of the control you used to have and just evolving it. I'll give you an example, a more realistic example. Like we used to have design crits. How many people have design crits? Okay. Do you do it every week? Yeah, kind of? All right. So when we were a good size, we started doing design crits every week, and it was in person. It was awesome. Obviously, we had our missteps where people were not mindful of other people and were giving, really kind of criticizing people, but we got through that and kind of fixed that. Sounds familiar to some folks, they're giggling. As the team scaled, it was getting too big. So we had to do it once every other week. And then Roman knows this. Roman was part of the team at some point. And then we had teams in different locations. And then so that started happening. And then we had people in different locations having design crit that was not managed centrally, that everyone was doing organically. And then people were complaining that, oh, a team in Chicago doesn't know what team in Belfast is doing. And we're kind of missing out on kind of building that community. And so then we started getting to monthly sessions. And at this time, we were like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. Like once a month, we're doing design crit? This is not right. And then we start using tools like Mural, where we start collaborating online, so we didn't do it all in person. But these are the challenges of scale that all of you are dealing with. And this is not easy. And there's no one size fits all, right? You've got to try different things to see what works. Lastly, if you're scaling across office locations, it's way more challenging than people think it is. If you think it's hard, it's harder than that. Does anybody here manage teams across more than one location? Okay, awesome. I'm sure you'll understand and relate to this. I just needed a bounce somewhere, so I put the bounce on the office. I thought it'd be funny if they all kind of fell apart, but that wouldn't be funny. Design culture, how do you scale when it's going beyond one office? That's hard, right? And what if you had like a head office that had majority of the designers, and there's some remote offices that have designers that are different time zones or different parts of the world? It gets more complicated. And then you have all these different offices, and you have different time zones. People are up at night, kind of trying to keep things afloat. You have to start asking the question, do we break one single piece of work across these offices, or do they have these individual offices do different things? Actually, a funny story here is the Belfast and Bangalore office had a lot more overlap than you'd think, mainly because the Bangalore office, the traffic situation was so bad that we had we had like 2 shifts of work where people worked from 12 in the afternoon to 9 at night. And that overlapped with the Belfast office by 5 hours, and so we were kind of treating them as one team. But those are the situational things you kind of have to figure out as you work with different time zones and situations to see how do we actually make this work. You can't have a UX presentation without scenarios. So I thought I'll throw in like a couple of scenarios. So you start with so let's take a first scenario where you're remotely managing 1 to 3 designers. Has anybody dealt with this where you're remotely managing people? We got 1, 2, 3, a few people, more than I thought. Well, from my experience, I've seen that the challenge with this is that if they're in a remote office, you've got to rely on their leadership on the floor to kind of give you the truth of what's going on. You can obviously have one-on-ones with these people, and they'll tell you everything's great, but then you might have to find out from the leaders in the local office as to what's really happening. Not that you don't trust them, it's more or less like you've got to compare notes. Because what happens, the worst thing that could happen is there is a situation that somebody here is having with somebody else in the office, and you don't know about it until it's too late. And so it gets challenging, right? The further the team is away from you, the more you want to make yourself available. So we had designers in Bangalore, and one of my managers used to wake up at 4 in the morning just to talk to them. And it's not because they had a meeting, it's just to make sure that they were available and kind of reach out to them on Slack. But those are the things you have to kind of overextend yourself when you have to make it work with remote folks. And in team meetings, I know somebody in the morning spoke about it, but using video is the best way to go. Like, it's when people are on the phone, you don't even know if they're multitasking, which most likely they are. But when you have video on, it's easier to kind of have eye contact and know who the people are. But when you start growing and you get, it's not just 1 to 3 designers kind of remotely. We have like a team of designers. Then you need to have like some sort of local leadership kind of planned for. And as you do that, you'll have to keep a few other things, right, aligned. First of all, the local leader will need to be aligned with some strategic initiatives of the head office, which is hard to do, but you have to do that. Another thing is the local leader is going to build a subset of the design culture that makes sense for that office, and that's okay too. And then you have to figure out a way to get feedback. How many of you do like skip levels, where it's not just you do skip levels? Great. At least, if not once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year would be ideal. But to really go understand like how is the leader helping the team enable themselves and evolve. And obviously leveraging video conference, but this time do it in a group setting. It's a lot more fun to get to know your colleagues from across the pond. Scaling design is hard across locations, and this is no joke. There is no secret recipe. There is no everybody's figured it out. A lot of it is us sharing stories with one another and kind of telling what worked for us with the idea that it may or may not work for somebody else you're talking to. So those are the 10 lessons. I tried to run through it real quick so that I covered everything. Hopefully you found something useful, and hopefully you said, you know what, I don't agree with everything, but I do agree with a few things he said, and that's okay. I don't expect you to agree with everything I say. Thank you.